Hello, this is PTTGRW and welcome back to the Kerbal Space Program. Today I'm going to be doing a mod spotlight over the Kethane mod. If you noticed, we do have it installed because the first thing you'll see is that the Kerbin world has all these green hexagons. Now, Kethane is currently, the project owner is Majir, but he did not start the project. Danny San was the one to start the project along with Cools. Now, let's hop in the world I have set up for this. And Kethane is a resource mod. It adds a resource known as Kethane that you can mine and convert into liquid fuel and oxidizer. Some of the parts Kethane adds are a bunch of different tanks used for storing Kethane that cannot be filled with Kethane. You cannot right-click on them and fill them with Kethane. You have to mine it strictly. So you cannot start off with the resource. Now, some of the parts it adds are, one, it adds a turbine engine, which requires K intake air and a little bit of Kethane to run, and it generates a small amount of electric charge and a decent amount of thrust. Some of the other parts it has are the converter units, which allows you to convert Kethane into liquid fuel, oxidizer, monopropellant, and xenon gas. Now, the way you get Kethane is by mining it, and the heavy drill and external drilling unit, basically small drill, large drill, allow you to mine Kethane once you've scanned for it. And to scan for Kethane, you need to be using either the compact survey unit or the medium survey unit. The only difference between the two is the scanning period and scanning period, power consumption, and the maximum altitude you're allowed to use it at. Now, to get started, I'm just going to create a real quick craft here to begin scanning for some Kethane. So what I've built here is just a pretty small Kethane scanner. Now, this is the only part that I'm going to be using from the Kethane mod currently, and this is the compact survey unit. So to show it off, first we're going to need to get into orbit around the moon. So what the Kethane scanner does is, let's go on the map for a quick second, head over to the moon. Now, Kethane adds this grid. If you can see it, that there are these small hexagons. Each grid is a different data point for the Kethane resource generator. Now, Kethane has generated its resource on the moon, and currently we need to scan it because you see we currently have no data. Now, when we scan over it, we will get data, and we will either find Kethane or we won't. And if you don't like the grid being there, you can disable it and you can search through your resources. However, we only have Kethane currently, so that's the only one we can observe on the moon. But let's get to launching and fix the staging. Now I'm going to launch this probe, get it to the moon, and we will start scanning for some Kethane. Okay, so now we've been captured by the moon and we're in its SOI. We can start activating this. Now, when we right click it, we see that we're currently out of range. But we have a couple of options. We can activate the scanner anyway. Now, the scanner will draw a little bit of power, but since we are out of its range, we can't do anything yet. So, let's do a small burn to get closer to the moon. Now, its range is pretty low, but we should definitely enter its range pretty soon. Warp speed, there we go. If you can hear the beeping noise, which is probably absurdly loud, then we're in range. Now, turning on the grid, What that noise is you'll hear two different types of beeping noises. One noise will determine whether or not you found Kethane, such as the one we've been hearing, and another will be if we haven't found it. But as you can see, you just click activate the detector, and when you fly over the hexagons on the planet, you will start scanning for the resource. Now that time we didn't find the resource. But if we come out of the map view, one thing we can do is, if nobody likes the scan tones, is you can disable it. Can't be time warped when you do it. But you can disable the scan tones, and then it will be completely quiet as you scan for the planet for all of your Kethane. Now, one thing you should note is this is a horrible orbit to try to actually scan for Kethane. What you're going to want is a polar orbit. The reason being is, in this orbit we're only going to go around the equator. But if we changed our orbit to be a polar orbit, then we'd eventually go around every bit of the planet. And I'll demonstrate this here in a second. Now I'm just going to change this thing's orbit into a polar orbit once we reach our apoapsis, but if you notice, pretty soon we're going to leave range and the scanner's no longer going to work. But I'll be right back once I'm in a polar orbit. Now this is what I mean by a polar orbit. Once we're going around the planet such as this, or the moon, then we will be able to go over every spot, because by the time we reach the North Pole versus the South Pole, the moon would have rotated, in which case we'd scan new area. Now if you notice, when we go at 100 times time warp, there begins these gaps everywhere. Now this is because the scanner we're using has a 1.5 second scan delay, meaning if we go over these hexagons faster than 1 every 1.5 seconds, then we're going to miss one. So typically 50 time warp is about the fastest you can go, otherwise you will start to just go by them and you won't be able to scan them. Now I'm just going to do a bit of scanning until we can find a suitable spot to land and start harvesting our Kethane. Sorry. One thing I'm going to do is I'm going to pronounce that wrong quite a bit, because I used to call it Kethane, but then I heard Majir actually pronounce it as Kethane. So I'm going to take his pronunciation, since he is currently the manager of this project. But I'll be right back. So now that we've scanned for some Kethane that we like, I kind of like this node here. Now when you mouse over it, you get the resource info. It tells you the center coordinates of the hexagon you mouse over, and it also tells you how much Kethane or whatever resource is there, and it tells you how much is present. And do take into account that when you're selecting what spot you want to mine your resources, make sure you pick one with enough resources, because you can drain out all of the resources and then you will not be able to mine anymore. But now that we've found which place that we want to mine our Kethane, let's go back to the Space Center and create a miner that we're going to ship over there and start collecting our Kethane. I'll make one and be right back. Okay, I've already taken the liberty in launching this vessel and getting it out here to the moon, but what we're using here is the small Kethane drill. We're using 2 of them, or going to. We have the medium converter unit, and we have the small Kethane tank, which works just like the large one, which you're probably going to be seeing here in the corner. Now, first thing we're going to need to do is land it on our Kethane deposit. Now, it's very important that you do land on the hexagon. It is the only way you can actually get resources from mining Kethane, or whatever other resource you manage to put into the Kethane plugin. And the reason for that is because the hexagons assume from their center point how large they are and how Kethane works. And this allows you to, when you're landed, you get an exact, basically, GPS position with latitude and longitude. And as long as that matches up with being inside one of the hexagons, then you will actually begin to get resources. So sometimes if you actually land near the edges, you might find that you can't mine the Kethane, but it is crucial that you actually land in the hexagon if you want to mine Kethane. And you also have to have it scanned to be able to mine it. Now we're just coming down pretty slowly, and we'll be landing here in a second so that we can show off how mining works. Touchdown right about now. Nice soft landing, and we're back. Okay, now that we are landed here on the moon, and we are in our green hexagon, meaning there is 400,000 Kethane here. What you're going to want to do is deploy your drills. Now, when you deploy them, they're going to play a really fun animation. If we watch, what's going to happen is this little drill bit is going to come out and start spinning. And it's going to start lowering into the moon's surface. Once it hits the moon, it's going to start sparking. And pretty soon, yep, there is the Kethane particle gas. This just lets us know that we have hit Kethane and that we are gaining some. Now if we look at our Kethane tank right here, we are gaining some. Now these drills do take a bit of power, so we're going to want our solar panels out so that we can power them. Now with both of them running, we're getting a decent amount. We can store 1,000 in this tank, but this could take forever for us to actually fill it up. Well, we're allowed to time accelerate, and even though we're time accelerating, we will gain Kethane at the same rate, but it also uses power at the same rate. Now, the converter is what we need, because we might have enough fuel to get back, but I don't feel like risking it. So we can activate the liquid fuel converter and the oxidizer converter. What this will do is this will drain Kethane from our tank and start filling our liquid fuel tanks. As you can see right there, we're filling that one and that one at the same rate. We're converting our mined Kethane into liquid fuel. And this conversion process will also happen at the time accelerated. So we've run out of Kethane, so it's going to take a little bit longer to fill up. But once the liquid fuel is completely full, then oxidizer will begin to fill up as well. And we've completely replenished this craft with all its liquid fuel, and now it's Kethane. So let's turn these off, and you can actually leave them on, and when we fly we'll be burning our Kethane into liquid fuel in oxidizer as we burn more of it. But once we fill up on Kethane here, we are going to retract our drills because we no longer need them, and they'll stop using power. Kethane can be said to be sort of a stage by stage kind of mod, because you first scan, then you mine it, and then you convert it. And this is pretty much all there is that you actually need to know about Kethane. This is most of the features and pretty much all of it. Okay, so I brought out some of the 2.5 meter parts to show you guys. Now, this is the medium survey unit. It's a bit larger, has a longer range than the compact survey unit, but it does the same task. It scans for a resource. Now, we also have the heavy converter unit, which just basically works faster than the medium one. We also have the heavy drilling units. Now, these are quite fun because they have an amazing animation and they're a lot larger. Also a lot faster with their Kethane mining speed. Now, what I just did was I quickly turned on the kethoelectric reactor unit, because what this does is it takes half a liter of Kethane. Yes, I'm saying Kethane now, not Kethane, Kethane. Takes half a liter of it per second and generates 75 electric charge. It's Let's activate another one of these. Now, this one little reactor here has enough power generation to power 3 of these heavy drills, and you gain a huge amount of kethane in the process. Also take note that the generator there produces a byproduct of xenon gas, so it can be very helpful for also powering your ion probes. Now you can see I'm retracting the drills here because I'm going to show you that there is a final way to get kethane. Other than mining it, you can use your Kerbals to produce kethane. And the only issue with this is it does require, in a term, a sacrifice. You can right click on the unreconstitutioner and blend your Kerbal into kethane. Now we don't know the exact process of this, but we'll be right back with the final bit of this mod, which is the turbine. So the last part that the Kethane plugin adds is this, the bypass turbine. Now what's nice about this turbine is it runs on Kethane, so you don't have to convert it into liquid fuel, and it also doesn't require any air intakes. As long as you're in the atmosphere, it will run. So let's fire up the engine, turn SAS on, and oh, it looks like we forgot our Kethane. Not to worry, we now have full Kethane with the magic of video editing. So now that our engine is active, like I said, we just need to be in the atmosphere. And we'll turn off our brakes, and we should start moving. There we go. Now this engine has a max thrust of 220, which makes it very nice. And overall it's a very nice engine because it's high thrust and it runs on such low kethane amounts. And since kethane has a lower density than liquid fuel, it's actually lighter. So we can fly for quite a long time with just these 2 small tanks of kethane. Like I said, I'm going to catch myself doing that way too much. And we can just fly around with this turbine and it will work as long as we stay in the atmosphere. The higher you get up, put in our landing gear, the higher you get up, the lower the specific impulse will be, and also the lower the intake fuel rate will be. Well, this brings us to the end of the mod spotlight over the Kethane plugin. If you liked the video, then like the video. If you disliked the video, then dislike the video. Leave a comment if you have a comment to leave. Sorry about the voice changing in my mic over the course of this, but my computer decided to change the settings on me. Anyhow, I'm PTTGRW, signing off.